Hello friends, welcome to my course on neuroanatomy or neurophysiology. Today we are going to discuss about cerebrospinal fluid and the ventricular system part 6. So let's start. In the previous lecture we discussed about how cerebrospinal fluid is produced and circulated in the subarachnoid area, and in this lecture we are going to discuss about hydrocephalus. Now what does hydrocephalus mean? Hydrocephalus is made up of two words. Hydro, which means water, and cephalus, which means in skull. So hydrocephalus means excessive water collected in the skull or cranial cavity. Before we discuss about hydrocephalus in detail, we will discuss about the central nervous system and how cerebrospinal fluid is produced in CNS. So here is the cerebrum, midbrain, cerebellum, pons, medulla oblongata and spinal cord. The first ventricle or the first structure which produces cerebrospinal fluid is the lateral ventricle present in the cerebrum. The opening of lateral ventricle is called the foramen of Monro. And foramen of Monro is connected with the third ventricle, which is the second cavity to produce cerebrospinal fluid. The third ventricle is connected with the cerebral aqueduct. Cerebral aqueduct is a tube which connects with the pontomedullary junction. A canal ascending from the spinal cord connects with the cerebral aqueduct called the central canal. And this cerebral aqueduct and central canal forms the fourth ventricle. Cerebrospinal fluid is produced in the lateral ventricle, third ventricle and the fourth ventricle. So this structure is the lateral ventricle. And this structure is the third ventricle. And here is the fourth ventricle. The cerebral aqueduct, which connects the third ventricle with the fourth ventricle. Now, I'll draw the arachnoid matter, the second layer of meninges, in the diagram. Here is the arachnoid matter, the second layer of meninges. Cerebrospinal fluid is produced by the arachnoid villi present in the lateral, third and the fourth ventricles. The cerebrospinal fluid passing through the foramen of Monro enters in the third ventricle. From the third ventricle, it passes through the cerebral aqueduct, and from the cerebral aqueduct, it enters in the fourth ventricle. Then it passes through the fourth ventricle and the foramen of Lashika, lateral foramens of fourth ventricle, and foramen of Magendie. Posterior foramen of the fourth ventricle is called foramen of Magendie. So, cerebrospinal fluid passes through these foramen of Lashika and foramen of Magendie and enters in the subarachnoid area. At the opening of foramen of Lashika, a lot of CSF is gathered, and this point is known as cerebellomedullary cistern. At the opening of foramen of Magendie, a lot of CSF is collected, and this is called pontomedullary cistern. Cerebrospinal fluid is circulated in the subarachnoid area. At the top of arachnoid matter, a special structure known as superior sagittal sinus is present. Few structures from arachnoid matter enter in the superior sagittal sinus, passing through the dural holes in the layer of superior sagittal sinuses. Here are the dural holes, and these small structures are called as arachnoid villi and granulations. These arachnoid villi and granulations helps the cerebrospinal fluid to enter in the superior sagittal sinuses and drain itself in the superior sagittal sinus, passing through the dural holes present in the layer of superior sagittal sinus. Now let's discuss about hydrocephalus. There are three major causes of hydrocephalus. The first cause is known as excessive production problem. The second major cause is known as abnormal circulation. And the third cause is known as reduced drainage. Now, let's discuss about excessive production problem. Here is the lateral ventricle and the third ventricle. And the cerebral aqueduct forming the fourth ventricle. Now, the choroid plexus present in the lateral ventricle produce cerebrospinal fluid. Sometimes tumor develop in the choroid plexus. And this type of tumor allow the choroid plexus to produce a lot of CSF, which causes hydrocephalus. A lot of CSF is collected in the lateral ventricle due to this tumor. And this is one primary reason of hydrocephalus in excessive production problem. Tumor in choroid plexus. Now, let's discuss about abnormal circulation. Here is the lateral ventricle. Connected with the foramen of Monro. At the opening of lateral ventricle, third ventricle is present. And the cerebral aqueduct forming the fourth ventricle. And the central canal descending downwards towards the spinal cord. And the choroid plexus present in the lateral ventricle produce cerebrospinal fluid. Sometimes a cyst develops in the third ventricle. And this cyst blocks the foramen of Monro and does not allow cerebrospinal fluid to enter in the third ventricle from the lateral ventricle. And this is why a lot of CSF is collected in the lateral ventricle. And lateral ventricle is overfilled with cerebrospinal fluid. And there is excessive expansion of the lateral ventricle. And because of this excessive expansion of lateral ventricle, it compresses and damages the brain substance present around it. And this is one of the primary reasons of abnormal circulation causing hydrocephalus. The second primary reason of abnormal circulation is tumor or cancer developed in the brain substance. If a tumor or cancer developed in brain substance blocks the cerebral aqueduct and cerebrospinal fluid is not allowed to pass through the cerebral aqueduct and enter in the fourth ventricle or fourth cavity. Cerebrospinal fluid coming from the lateral ventricles and the third ventricle tries to pass through the cerebral aqueduct, but because cerebral aqueduct is compressed due to cancer or tumor developed in the brain substance, it does not allow the cerebrospinal fluid to enter in the fourth ventricle or the fourth cavity of the brain. And this is second primary reason of abnormal circulation causing hydrocephalus. This causes excessive expansion of lateral ventricle and the third ventricle. The third primary reason of abnormal circulation causing hydrocephalus is cancer or tumor developed in the cerebellum. If cancer or tumor develops in cerebellum, it will block foramina flascica. And when the foramina flascica is blocked from laterally, then it does not allow cerebrospinal fluid to pass through the fourth ventricle and enter in the subarachnoid area. And this causes expansion of the lateral ventricle, third ventricle and the fourth ventricle, including the cerebral aqueduct. Now, the fifth major cause of abnormal circulation is meningitis. Sometimes due to meningitis, few cells block the subarachnoid area. And when these cells block the subarachnoid area, it does not allow cerebrospinal fluid to drain itself in the superior sagittal sinuses. And this is one of the primary reasons of reduced drainage as well as abnormal circulation of cerebrospinal fluid. Due to meningitis, cerebrospinal fluid is not allowed to pass through the subarachnoid area and enter in the superior sagittal sinuses and circulate itself in the subarachnoid area. Now, let's discuss about the reduced drainage. One primary cause of reduced drainage is block of microscopic holes present in the arachnoid villi and granulations. Now, what's the difference between arachnoid villi and granulation? Here, is an arachnoid villi and granulation. Now, what's the difference between arachnoid villi and granulations? First of all, there are small holes present in the structure which are microscopic holes which allow the cerebrospinal fluid to move in one direction from the subarachnoid area towards the superior sagittal sinuses. Now, arachnoid villi is a microscopic structure which contain these small holes which allow one direction of cerebrospinal fluid, but arachnoid granulation contain many arachnoid villi. And this whole structure is an arachnoid granulation. That arachnoid villi is a microscopic structure which contain microscopic holes which allow one direction of cerebrospinal fluid, one movement of cerebrospinal fluid from the subarachnoid area till the superior sagittal sinuses. But an arachnoid granulation contains many arachnoid villi. Now, due to RBCs, red blood cells, WBCs, white blood cells, normal cells or bacteria floating in cerebrospinal fluid. For example, few bacteria, RBCs and WBCs are floating in cerebrospinal fluid. These red blood cells, white blood cells and bacteria block the microscopic holes present in the arachnoid villi. Here the bacteria and block the microscopic holes present in the arachnoid villi. And when these microscopic holes are blocked, it does not allow cerebrospinal fluid to pass through these microscopic holes and enter in the superior sagittal sinuses. And this causes reduced drainage of cerebrospinal fluid, causing hydrocephalus. Excessive amount of cerebrospinal fluid is collected in the subarachnoid area, excessive expansion of fourth ventricle, lateral ventricle and the third ventricle. Now, let's have a quick review of today's lecture. We discussed about hydrocephalus. Hydrocephalus means excessive CSF collected in the skull or cranial cavity. There are three major causes of hydrocephalus. The first cause is excessive production problem. If a tumor or cancer develops in the choroid plexus, it allows the choroid plexus to produce a lot of CSF, which causes hydrocephalus. Then we discussed about abnormal circulation. The first major point of abnormal circulation is blockage in foramen of Monro. If foramen of Monro is blocked, then it will not allow cerebrospinal fluid to enter in the third ventricle. And CSF is filled in the lateral ventricle, which causes excessive expansion of lateral ventricle, and the brain substance present around the lateral ventricle is compressed and damaged. The third major cause is cancer tumor developed in the brain substance compresses and blocks the cerebral aqueduct, and when the cerebral aqueduct is blocked, it does not allow cerebrospinal fluid to pass through the cerebral aqueduct and enter in the fourth ventricle. Then the next major point of abnormal circulation is cancer or tumor developed in cerebellum. If cancer or tumor develops in cerebellum, it will block foramen of Lashika if it is laterally, and if the cancer is in the posterior part of the central nervous system, then it may block foramen of Magendie. And if it blocks any of these foramens, the cerebrospinal fluid will not be allowed to enter in the subarachnoid area and circulate itself in the subarachnoid cavity. And this causes hydrocephalus, excessive expansion of lateral ventricle including third ventricle and fourth ventricle and cerebral aqueduct. Then the next major point of abnormal circulation is due to meningitis. Due to meningitis, cells block the subarachnoid area, and this does not allow cerebrospinal fluid to drain itself in the superior sagittal sinuses, and this is the next major cause of abnormal circulation causing hydrocephalus. Then when we discuss about reduced drainage, microscopic holes in arachnoid villi are blocked due to red blood cells, white blood cells or bacteria floating in cerebrospinal fluid, and this causes hydrocephalus. So this was all about today's lecture. In the next lecture, we will discuss about the blood supply to brain. Thank you.